You don't actually love the people you're trying to change. You love your fantasy of who they could become, and that's not love. That's manipulation with a greeting card slogan attached to it. Real love sees a person exactly as they are right now and says, you are complete. But you look at people and see improvement projects, potential waiting to be unlocked, rough drafts of the human beings you think they should be. You have confused love with renovation, acceptance with settling, and patience with enabling your own controlling behavior. The people in your life are not auditioning for the role of perfect partner, perfect child, or perfect friend in the movie of your expectations. They are living their own lives, starring in their own stories. And you have cast yourself as the director of a film no one asked you to make. There's a woman named Elena who changed my understanding of human relationships forever. Elena was brilliant, a gifted architect who could design stunning buildings that would last for centuries. She had this incredible ability to see exactly what needed to be fixed in any structure, any blueprint, any construction project. But when she came home every evening, she carried that same mindset through her front door for 15 years. Elena treated her husband like a renovation project. Every morning she would wake up with a mental list of improvements she wanted to make to this man she claimed to love. If only he would speak more confidently in public. If only he wouldn't leave his coffee cup on the counter. If only he would dress better. If only he would be more ambitious. If only he would stop watching those silly shows. If only he would read the books I recommend. If only, if only, if only. Elena was exhausted. She was frustrated. She was angry. And she couldn't understand why this man, after 15 years of her helpful suggestions, her gentle corrections, her loving guidance, was becoming more distant, more defensive, and more resentful with each passing day. Then something happened that shattered everything Elena thought she knew about relationships. One evening, after another failed attempt to convince her husband to change his communication style, she found herself standing in front of her bathroom mirror, tears streaming down her face. And in that moment, she heard her own voice speaking the words that had been haunting her marriage. Why can't you just be different? But this time, she wasn't speaking to her husband. She was speaking to herself. The woman staring back at her in that mirror was someone who had spent her entire life trying to be different than she naturally was. Elena realized that every single thing she was trying to change about her husband was something she had been at war with inside herself. His lack of confidence in public. She had been hiding her own insecurities behind perfectionism for decades. His casual approach to life, and she secretly envied his ability to relax while she drove herself into the ground with endless self-improvement projects. His resistance to her suggestions. She had been resisting her own inner voice, her own authentic desires, her own natural personality for so long that she had forgotten who she really was. Underneath all those layers of should be and could be and ought to be that night, Elena made a discovery that changed everything. The people we desperately want to change are showing us exactly what we need to heal within ourselves. Every criticism we have of another person is actually a conversation we need to have with our own reflection, you see. When we try to change people, we think we're helping them become better versions of themselves. But what we're really doing is trying to change them into better versions of us. We're trying to make them think the way we think, act the way we value, and approach life the way we approach life. And here's the problem with that: it never works. Not because people are stubborn or resistant or difficult, but because you cannot change another human being. You simply do not have that power. You were never designed to have that power. You were never meant to carry that responsibility. But we keep trying anyway, don't we? We keep pushing and pulling and suggesting and hinting and arguing and pleading and manipulating, hoping that somehow, someday, this person we claim to love will finally become the person we need them to be. And while we're busy trying to change them, something tragic happens to us. We stop seeing who they actually are. We stop appreciating their unique gifts, their natural strengths, their authentic personality. We become so focused on who they could be that we miss who they are right now, in this moment, standing right in front of us. Elena told me that the saddest part of her story wasn't that she wasted 15 years trying to change her husband. The saddest part was that she spent 15 years missing out on the man she actually married. While she was busy trying to turn him into someone else, she never took the time to truly know, understand, and appreciate the person he already was. When Elena finally stopped trying to change her husband and started working on accepting herself, something miraculous happened. Her husband began to relax around her. He started sharing more of his thoughts, his dreams, his fears. He became more affectionate, more present, more engaged in their relationship. Not because Elena had finally found the right technique to change him, but because she had finally stopped needing him to be different. The moment Elena stopped trying to fix her husband, she freed him to be himself. And when people feel free to be themselves in your presence, they naturally become the best version of who they already are. But here's what Elena learned that I want you to understand today. The energy you're spending trying to change other people is energy you should be investing in changing yourself. Every moment you spend frustrated with someone else's behavior is a moment you could be using to examine your own reactions, your own expectations, your own unhealed wounds. Because the truth is, the people who trigger you the most are your greatest teachers. They're showing you exactly where you still need to grow. They're revealing the parts of yourself that you haven't yet learned to love and accept. When you stop trying to change people and start asking yourself why their behavior bothers you so much, you begin a journey of self-discovery that will transform every relationship in your life. You begin to understand that your peace, your joy, your fulfillment, none of these things depend on other people being different than they are. The exhausting cycle of trying to fix people is actually a cry from our own unhealed wounds. Your frustration with people makes perfect sense once you understand what you're actually trying to do. You're trying to be God. Now, before you get offended, let me tell you about Master Chen. Chen was considered the finest potter in his village for 40 years. He had worked with clay, creating beautiful vessels that people treasured for generations. His hands knew exactly how much pressure to apply, exactly when the clay was ready to be shaped, exactly what each piece of clay wanted to become. But Chen had a problem. He had a vision for the perfect vase, tall, elegant, with intricate patterns carved into its surface. And he became obsessed with making every piece of clay conform to this one perfect design, day after day. Chen would take wet clay and try to force it into his vision of perfection. He would pull and stretch and manipulate, trying to make short, thick clay become tall and thin. He would carve elaborate patterns into clay that was meant for simple, smooth surfaces. He would fight with the clay, wrestling it into submission, determined to prove that his vision was more important than the clay's natural properties. And day after day, Chen's pottery would crack in the kiln. The clay would split and break and crumble because it was being forced into shapes it was never meant to hold. Chen's workshop became filled with broken pottery, beautiful pieces destroyed because they couldn't maintain the form they were forced to take. One morning, Chen's young apprentice asked him a question that changed everything. Master, why do you keep trying to make the clay become something it doesn't want to be? Chen stopped his work and looked around his workshop at all the cracked vases, the broken bowls, the shattered dreams of perfection. And for the first time, he realized what he had been doing wrong. The clay wasn't the problem. His vision wasn't the problem. The problem was that he was trying to force his vision onto clay that had its own natural design, its own inherent purpose, its own destiny to fulfill. That day, Chen began working with the clay instead of against it. He started listening to what each piece wanted to become. Some clay was meant to be short and wide. Some was meant to be tall and narrow. Some was meant for smooth surfaces. Others for textured patterns. And when Chen stopped forcing his vision onto the clay and started helping each piece fulfill its own potential, something beautiful happened. His pottery became more magnificent than anything he had ever created when he was trying to make everything the same. This is exactly what you're doing when you try to change people. You're taking human beings, complex, unique, wonderfully designed individuals, and you're trying to force them into your vision of what they should be. You're treating them like raw material for your dreams, instead of recognizing that they are already complete works of art with their own purpose to fulfill. When you try to make an introvert become an extrovert, you're fighting against their natural design. When you try to make a creative person become more organized, you're asking them to betray their authentic nature. When you try to make someone who processes information slowly start making quick decisions, you're forcing them into a mold they were never meant to fit. And just like Chen's pottery, relationships crack under this kind of pressure. People become defensive, resentful, and distant when they're constantly being asked to be someone they're not. They withdraw their authentic selves and either try to become what you want, which exhausts them, or they rebel against your expectations entirely. But here's what Chen learned that will transform your relationships. Every person already has everything they need to become who they're meant to be. Your job isn't to add to them or subtract from them or reshape them. Your job is to recognize their natural gifts and create an environment where those gifts can flourish. When Chen stopped trying to change the clay and started working with its natural properties, he created masterpieces. When you stop trying to change people and start appreciating their authentic design, you create space for them to become the best version of who they already are. The most beautiful relationships happen when people feel free to be themselves. When they know they don't have to perform or pretend or modify their personality to earn your love and acceptance. When they can relax into their authentic nature because you're not constantly trying to improve them. People are not your project. They are not broken things that need your fixing. They are not raw material waiting for your creative vision. They are complete human beings with their own dreams, their own gifts, their own path to walk. People are not raw material for your vision. They are completed works in progress with their own destiny to fulfill. Isabella had the most beautiful garden in her entire neighborhood. People would walk by her house just to admire the vibrant colors, the perfect arrangements, the way every plant seemed to thrive under her care. But Isabella's success as a gardener didn't happen overnight. It came after years of making one costly mistake. When Isabella first started gardening, she had a picture in her mind of what the perfect garden should look like. She wanted roses everywhere, tall, elegant roses creating a wall of red and pink beauty around her entire property. So she planted roses in every corner of her yard, regardless of the soil type, the amount of sunlight, or the natural conditions of each area. Some areas of her garden were shady and cool. Isabella planted roses there anyway. Some areas had sandy soil that drained quickly. She planted roses there too. Some spots got harsh afternoon sun that would scorch delicate petals. Isabella didn't care. She wanted roses everywhere. Then Isabella made an even bigger mistake. When the roses in the shady areas started to struggle, instead of accepting that roses weren't meant for those spots, she began a war against nature itself. She installed grow lights to force sun into shady areas. She replaced the natural soil with expensive rose-simplific dirt. She built elaborate irrigation systems to compensate for poor drainage. Isabella spent thousands of dollars and countless hours trying to make roses grow where roses didn't belong. And what happened? The roses died anyway. But worse than that, the plants that were actually meant to thrive in those shady areas the beautiful ferns and hostas and flowering shrubs that would have flourished naturally, never got a chance to grow after 3 years of dead roses and frustration. Isabella met an old gardener named Frank, who asked her a simple question. Why are you fighting your garden instead of working with it? That question changed everything. Frank taught Isabella that the most beautiful gardens aren't created by forcing every plant to be the same. They're created by understanding what each area of the garden naturally supports and then planting accordingly. So Isabella started over. In the sunny areas, she planted roses and they flourished beyond her wildest dreams. In the shady areas, she planted hostas and ferns, and they created a lush green paradise that was even more beautiful than roses would have been. In the areas with poor drainage, she planted lavender and other hardy plants that actually preferred those conditions. Within 1 year, Isabella had the garden she had always dreamed of. Not because every plant was the same, but because every plant was exactly where it belonged. This is the secret to all successful relationships, the garden principle. You cannot make roses grow in shade, and you cannot make people thrive outside of their natural environment. When you try to make a quiet, thoughtful person become the life of every party, you're planting roses in shade. When you try to make someone who needs routine and structure become spontaneous and flexible, you're forcing plants into soil they weren't designed for. When you try to make people change their fundamental nature, you kill what could have been beautiful if you just let it grow naturally. The most successful parents understand this principle. They don't try to make all their children identical. They recognize each child's unique gifts and create environments where those specific gifts can flourish. The most successful managers understand this principle. They don't try to make every employee fit the same mold. They place people in roles that match their natural strengths. The most beautiful relationships happen when you stop trying to change people's nature and start creating conditions where their authentic self can bloom. When you give people the right soil, the right amount of light, the right environment for who they actually are. They will amaze you with their natural beauty and strength. Your energy should go toward understanding people's natural strengths, not fighting their natural tendencies. Jonathan was losing his mind. As the CEO of a growing marketing company, he had hired some of the most talented people in the industry. His team included brilliant graphic designers, innovative strategists, and creative minds that could solve problems others couldn't even see. But Jonathan was obsessed with one thing. He wanted everyone to be more like him. Jonathan was a natural extrovert. He thrived in meetings, loved presentations, and got energized by brainstorming sessions with lots of people. He assumed that's how all productive work happened. So he scheduled daily team meetings, weekly presentations, and monthly company-wide brainstorming sessions. He encouraged everyone to speak up more, share their ideas publicly, and network aggressively with clients. But something strange was happening. His most talented employees were becoming less productive, not more. His best graphic designer, Anna, who used to create stunning campaigns, started producing average work. His top strategist, Michael, who once developed breakthrough marketing concepts, began offering safe, predictable ideas. Jonathan responded the way most leaders do. He tried harder to change them. He sent Anna to public speaking workshops. He enrolled Michael in leadership training. He brought in consultants to teach his team how to be more outgoing, more assertive, more like him. The result, Anna started coming to work stressed and anxious. Michael began missing deadlines for the first time in his career. 3 of his best employees quit within 6 months, saying they needed to find a workplace where they could be themselves. Then Jonathan's business coach asked him a question that stopped him cold. What if the problem isn't that your people need to change? What if the problem is that you're not letting them work the way they work best that week? Jonathan did something revolutionary. He canceled all the mandatory meetings and asked each employee to tell him how they preferred to work. What he discovered shocked him. Anna, his graphic designer, said she did her best creative work early in the morning when the office was quiet. All those meetings and brainstorming sessions were interrupting her most productive hours. Michael, his strategist, explained that he needed time alone to think before sharing ideas. The constant pressure to speak up in meetings was actually preventing him from developing his best concepts. So Jonathan tried an experiment. He created quiet workspaces for people who needed them. He switched from mandatory daily meetings to optional weekly check-ins. He gave his introverted employees permission to submit ideas in writing instead of presenting them verbally. He stopped trying to make his creative people act like salespeople and his analytical people act like performers within 3 months. Something extraordinary happened. Anna's creativity exploded. Working in her natural environment, she produced the most innovative campaigns the company had ever seen. Michael developed 3 breakthrough strategies that landed them their biggest clients ever. The employees who had been struggling began excelling in ways Jonathan had never imagined possible. But here's the most important part of Jonathan's story. When he stopped trying to change his employees, he freed himself too. He was no longer exhausted from constantly managing personalities and trying to fix people. He could focus his energy on strategy, vision, and growth instead of spending it on endless attempts to transform his team into copies of himself. Jonathan realized that his role as a leader wasn't to change people. It was to create an environment where people's natural gifts could shine. When he stopped fighting his employees' authentic nature and started leveraging it, his company didn't just survive, it thrived beyond his wildest expectations. The moment you stop trying to change people, you discover their true potential. The moment you stop forcing them to work against their nature, they start working with a power and creativity you never knew they had. When you stop trying to change people, you free both them and yourself to operate in your zones of genius. Now that you understand why trying to change people doesn't work, you're probably asking yourself the most important question. If I can't change people, how do I build healthy relationships? How do I maintain my standards? How do I handle behavior that genuinely hurts me or affects my life? The answer lies in understanding the difference between influence and manipulation, between boundaries and walls, between acceptance and tolerance. Let me tell you about a woman named Victoria who discovered this difference in the most challenging relationship of her life, her relationship with her teenage daughter, Emma. Emma was 17 and everything Victoria had never been. Victoria was organized, punctual, and thrived on routine. Emma was creative, spontaneous, and treated schedules as rough suggestions. Victoria planned everything weeks in advance. Emma made decisions in the moment. Victoria kept her room spotless. Emma's room looked like a tornado had hit it for years. Victoria had tried every technique she could find to change Emma. She implemented reward systems, consequences, lectures about responsibility, and heart-to-heart talks about the importance of organization. Nothing worked. In fact, the harder Victoria tried to change Emma, the more rebellious and distant her daughter became. Their relationship was deteriorating so badly that Emma had started spending most of her time at friends' houses to avoid the constant criticism and improvement suggestions at home. Victoria was at her breaking point when she attended a parenting workshop where the facilitator said something that changed everything. Your job as a parent is not to change your child's personality. Your job is to help your child become the best version of who they already are. That statement hit Victoria like lightning. She realized she had been trying to turn Emma into a mini version of herself, instead of helping Emma develop her own unique gifts. So Victoria decided to try a completely different approach. Instead of focusing on changing Emma's messy tendencies, she started appreciating Emma's creativity. Instead of criticizing her spontaneity, she began celebrating her daughter's ability to find joy in unexpected moments. Instead of trying to force Emma into rigid schedules, She worked with Emma to create flexible routines that honored both their needs. But here's the crucial part. Victoria didn't abandon all expectations or boundaries. She didn't say, well, Emma can do whatever she wants because that's just who she is. Instead, Victoria learned to separate Emma's personality from Emma's responsibilities. Victoria said to Emma, I understand that you're naturally more spontaneous and creative, and I love that about you. I'm not going to try to change your personality anymore, but there are still family values and responsibilities that we all need to respect. So let's figure out how you can meet those responsibilities in a way that works with your natural style, not against it. Together, they created what Victoria called personality-friendly boundaries. Emma still had to keep her room clean, but instead of daily cleaning, they agreed on a weekly deep clean that worked with Emma's natural rhythm. Emma still had to be home by curfew, but Victoria gave her flexibility in how she managed her time leading up to that deadline. The most amazing thing happened. When Emma felt accepted for who she was, she became more cooperative, not less. When she wasn't constantly defending her personality, she had energy to work on her responsibilities. When Victoria stopped trying to change Emma's nature, Emma started voluntarily adopting some of Victoria's organizational habits, not because she was forced to, but because she could see their value within 6 months. Victoria and Emma had rebuilt their relationship completely. They were closer than they had ever been, not because Emma had become more like Victoria, but because Victoria had learned to love Emma exactly as she was, while still maintaining healthy expectations. This is the blueprint for every healthy relationship in your life. You accept people's personality while maintaining clear boundaries about behavior. You love people for who they are while still having standards for how you expect to be treated. Acceptance doesn't mean you have to tolerate disrespect. It means you stop trying to change someone's fundamental nature, while clearly communicating what behavior you will and won't accept in your life. Influence happens naturally when people feel completely accepted. When someone knows you're not trying to change them, they relax their defenses. When their defenses are down, they become open to learning from you, growing with you, and even adopting some of your positive habits, not because you're forcing them to, but because they want to. But manipulation, which is what we've been calling trying to change people, creates the opposite effect. When people feel like you're trying to change their fundamental nature, they put up walls. They become resistant to any influence you might have had if you had simply accepted them first. The most powerful leaders, the most successful parents, the happiest couples all understand this principle. They create environments where people feel free to be authentic while also maintaining clear expectations about respect, responsibility, and mutual consideration. Here's your new relationship blueprint. First, accept people's personality completely, love their natural gifts, appreciate their authentic nature, celebrate what makes them unique. Second, communicate your boundaries clearly. Let people know what behavior you will accept and what you won't. But do it without attacking their personality or trying to change who they are. Third, focus your energy on becoming the kind of person who naturally inspires others, rather than someone who has to force others to change. When you work on your own character, your own emotional health, your own spiritual growth, you become magnetic. People want to be around you. They want to learn from you. They want to grow because of your influence, not in spite of your pressure. Fourth, remember that every person has their own relationship with their Creator, their own path to walk, their own lessons to learn. Your job is not to speed up their process or redirect their journey. Your job is to be a loving, supportive presence while they figure out their own life. The greatest gift you can give another human being is the freedom to be authentically themselves in your presence. When you give people that gift, they will give you something precious in return. They will show up as the best version of who they really are. But when you try to change people, You rob them of that freedom, and you rob yourself of the opportunity to experience their authentic beauty. You miss out on who they really are because you're too busy trying to make them into who you think they should be. Stop trying to change people. Start creating space for them to flourish as exactly who they are. Stop fighting their nature. Start working with their gifts. Stop seeing people as projects to fix. Start seeing them as masterpieces to appreciate. When you do this, something miraculous will happen in your relationships. The people in your life will become more loving, more cooperative, more open, and more willing to grow. Not because you finally found the right technique to change them, but because you finally gave them permission to be themselves. And you will discover that the relationships you've always wanted were there all along, waiting for you to stop trying so hard to create them and simply allow them to be. True influence comes through inspiration, not transformation. And inspiration only works when people feel completely accepted for who they already are.